God.
A beloved grandmother is found viciously stabbed to death.
It's this little old lady. What has she done to anyone in her whole life? What kind of a monster would do this?
To crack the case, a young Joe Kenda must wade through a swamp of false leads and dirty dealings.
What's that on your pants?
How nice. Family that drinks together stays together, I suppose.
And unearth a fiendish plot to kill a helpless victim.
She needed control.
Welcome to Homicide, Kenda. It's a disgusting business.
You're trying to put together a giant puzzle. You have 1,000,000 pieces, and maybe you only need 300. So you have to figure out which one fits where.
This is 1979, and Charles Jackson is driving to his grandmother's house.
Charles called on her a little earlier, did not get an answer. This worried him, so he decided to check in on her.
Grandma? It's Charlie. Grandma? Are you here? Grandma?
What the hell? There are dishes in the sink, and there's a faucet dripping, both of which are very unlike her.
Grandma? Grandma, are you asleep? Are you here?
And it's unspeakable.
Oh my...
Just a few miles away, rookie detective Joe Kenda is settling nicely into his new role with Colorado Springs PD.
Nice job on that interro, Kenda.
Thanks, Lou. I appreciate that.
You're really coming along.
In late August of 1979, I was a detective in the Crimes Against Persons unit.
Hey, boys. Just got a call about a body out on East Monument. Smith, you ready for another one?
You got it.
It's all yours.
So this particular case, Lou Smith was the person assigned as the lead detective. Smith was extremely experienced and was a phenomenal detective. At that time, there were no teams, there was no organization like it turned into years later. The case came in the door. The first detective the sergeant laid his eyes on was the lead detective.
Within minutes, Detective Lou Smith arrives on scene.
When Smith arrives, it's the usual circus of marked units and all the chaos that goes on when you arrive at a homicide scene.
Evening, Detective.
Hunley, clue me in.
Victim is an 85-year-old elderly female named Catherine Simpson.
Heart attack?
I'm afraid not. Her grandson found her inside with multiple stab wounds. The scene is pretty gruesome.
All right. Well, let's take a look. No sign of forced entry.
None that I can tell.
When Smith enters the home, he observes that there is no sign of forced entry to the front door. He then proceeds into the living room.
This belong to the victim?
Yes, sir.
She's got over 50 bucks here.
The victim's purse does not appear disturbed, and the first deduction you might get out of that is this doesn't appear to be a robbery.
What's this?
There's a pair of women's underwear on the floor.
This could just be misplaced, but let's make sure we bag that in case it plays into what happened.
When he goes into that kitchen, he sees some dirty dishes in the sink. He also sees a blue apron on the floor that appears to be damaged slightly.
Let's make sure we bag this as well.
Yes, sir.
Noticing underwear and a torn apron in the kitchen, you're starting to think this is possibly some kind of personal attack.
Where's the body?
It's in the bedroom. Yes, sir.
My God.
The victim had been stabbed multiple times, was laying on the bed.
The likelihood of sexual assault is very great.
Is that a yardstick? What the hell?
She's only been dead a short period of time.
Who did you say discovered the body?
The victim's grandson.
Oh, I think maybe I should probably speak with him.
Not this way.
She's been assaulted and murdered in her own home. What kind of a monster would do this?
Just doesn't make sense.
Mr. Jackson, I'm Detective Smith.
Hi.
I'm very sorry for what happened to your grandmother.
Charles is, of course, immensely distressed. He has seen what has happened to his grandmother.
Can you tell me about your grandmother? Were you close with her?
Yeah, we were really close. She basically raised my brother and I.
He informed Smith that she's lived in Colorado Springs since 1920, and she's been in this particular house for over 20 years.
She was 85 years old, but you couldn't tell.
She stays active tending her garden out back, especially her prized tomatoes. So she's not an invalid by any means.
Was she typically out and about in town?
No, she had cataracts, so she didn't drive anymore. I mean, she could still take care of herself, but my brother and I, we'd help her with groceries, things like that.
Charles Jackson explains that he and his brother took very good care of her. They talked to her every day and helped her in every way that they could. And on this day, he called her in the morning and spoke with her.
Did she say anything was wrong when you talked with her?
No, everything was fine. And then when I tried to get a hold of her this afternoon, she didn't answer.
What was a typical day like for your grandmother?
Mr. Jackson said that his grandmother was a creature of habit. She would eat her dinner at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and would immediately do the dishes.
Looking at the scene, we see that the dishes haven't been done.
She was probably attacked while she was in the act of cleaning up, which would have been shortly after 4 o'clock that afternoon. It's shortly after 4 o'clock when she's in that kitchen, alive, and 7:30, she's in the bedroom dead. So in that 3.5-hour period, a perpetrator probably enters through the back door, and the attack progressed.
Thank you for your time, Charles. And I promise we're going to find who did this to your grandmother.
Thank you.
How you doing?
Kenda, you're just in time.
So what can I do?
Help me canvass this neighborhood. It's likely the suspect went in through the back of the house. We need to find out if someone saw or heard anything suspicious.
That makes sense.
This was a small community, little neighborhood. They keep an eye out for one another, so we're hoping somebody saw something.
And we can start with that guy.
Smith looks at the house next door and sees a man sitting on the porch drinking a beer, obviously taking in the activity of the police.
Evening, detectives.
You live here?
No. House sitting for my parents. They're out east on vacation.
I'm Detective Smith. This is Detective Kenda.
James DeCoin. What happened over there?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out. Did you happen to see any strange activity at Mrs. Simpson's house today?
Nope. Can't say that I did.
He says he remembers seeing Catherine Simpson in her backyard gardening, which he says is her habit, and he became sleepy and he went inside and took a nap. And he was awakened by the police activities.
What time would you say you took that nap?
Oh, about 3 o'clock or so.
Sir,
What's up, Dan?
we got a call of a potential suspect in a park down the street.
Okay. Thank you for your time, Mr. DeCohen. If you should happen to remember anything else you saw, you give us a call.
Will do.
When Smith talks to this guy, Smith gets that old feeling.
Part of being a good detective is having kind of a seventh sense where you actually can start feeling whether this guy is actually telling you the truth when you talk to somebody or if there's something hinky about him. Detective Smith had that good sense. He didn't feel that this individual was really being honest or truthful. He was hiding something, but he had nothing to go on, so nothing to really follow up at that time.
There's something about James DuCoin that just isn't quite right, and Smith makes a mental note of that.
I'm going to go check this out. Continue canvassing the area, will you?
You got it.
So Detective Smith responds to the neighborhood park where patrol officers are holding a underage 17-year-old male.
What's your name, son?
Cole?
Cole? Cole what?
Cole Michaels?
This guy looks like he's been drinking. He's a little bewildered, a little disheveled. He doesn't know what's going on.
What are you doing out here by yourself, Mr. Michaels? Wait a minute. What's that on your pants?
Oh,
Looks like blood.
This is really starting to pique our interest because obviously we have a bloody scene and the person who did this did not walk away without any blood on him.
Yeah, I cut myself.
Oh, yeah. On what?
Who is he? Is he just some kid who has an injury from some other source? Or is he a murderer who killed a little old lady in a house next door?
A quick records check reveals a bench warrant out for Cole Michaels' arrest.
So they inform Cole he's under arrest and take him into police headquarters and question him further about this murder.
I gotta be honest. That looks pretty recent to me.
I got it yesterday, I swear. I wouldn't.
And looking at these two wounds, they appear fresh. And it's not unlikely that when you stab somebody, even with a pair of scissors, that you're not going to get some injuries.
Okay, Cole. We want to ask you some more questions, but before we can do that, your mother has to arrive. So, right now, we're going to confiscate your clothing.
Okay.
Come with me. Put your hands over the table like this. Palms down.
This individual was 17 years old.
Flip them over.
Colorado law states that a minor can't willingly or knowingly waive his rights without a parent being present.
While they're waiting for the mom to show up, they are permitted to take evidence from this person. So they're taking photographs of his injuries, and they're also swabbing his hands to see what they may find in a laboratory as to what may be on his hands.
Within the hour, Cole Michaels' mother arrives at the station and grants an interview with police.
So you think my son is involved in a murder?
Quite possibly.
Cole, is he serious?
Mom, I didn't do anything. I swear.
For anyone who's had a teenager, this is like your worst nightmare.
Your son was found sleeping on a park bench with blood on his clothing, less than 4 blocks from a murder scene, and we'd like to know why that is.
You told me you were staying with your brother.
It was, but he and I,
Look, okay, Cole, just why don't you start by telling us exactly what happened today?
Okay.
This individual explained that on this particular day, he'd worked till about 3 o'clock. After work, he went out drinking with his friends till about 1 o'clock, at which time he went to the park to sleep, and that's where he was contacted.
He tells Smith, I've been staying with my brother, but we got in an argument and he threw me out, and I've been sleeping in the park for the last couple of nights.
So you went directly to the park after being downtown?
Yeah.
And you didn't stop someplace?
No.
And this cut on your hand?
I got it at work yesterday. I must have nicked it again today.
Now, this kid has an explanation for his whereabouts, but is it true? Maybe, maybe not. Smith's not going to just believe him.
Detective Smith calls the lab to see if the samples taken from Cole earlier corroborate his story.
Okay. Thanks for calling.
And none of his samples match anything found at the crime scene. So there is nothing to connect him to this offense other than proximity, which is not enough.
With his first lead a bust, Detective Smith hopes the autopsy might turn up new evidence.
Okay, Doc, what you got?
Well, no surprises in terms of what killed our victim.
Cause of death is from internal bleeding from multiple stab wounds to the chest.
We did notice something interesting regarding evidence of a sexual assault.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
There isn't any.
What? You're kidding.
That seems very odd. If you're going to tear clothing and remove underwear, what is it that you're doing?
That's not what we expected. We really expected to have some biological samples to indicate sexual assault.
How often do you see clothing disturbed like that and no evidence of sexual assault?
Hardly ever.
So maybe his attempt was disturbed by something.
That's very possible. This perpetrator may have had one thing in mind, and it got changed, and in a fit of rage, he kills her, and he runs.
Thank you for this, Doc.
You bet. Good luck.
This elderly, frail, 85-year-old woman was murdered. We have no motive. Nothing's adding up yet.
The autopsy results raise even more questions about this person. Who is this? What is this?
Hey, Lou. Call just came in for you.
Who is it?
Charles Jackson says he's grandson of last night's murder victim.
I'll take that.
Okay.
Hey, Charles. Detective Smith.
Hi, Detective.
What's going on?
So, I don't know if this is relevant or not, but my brother and I were going through my grandmother's finances, and we found something that's a little bit strange.
Charles notices that she has not deposited any of her stock dividends or Social Security checks for the last 2 years. And this is a little unusual.
2 years? Any idea how much money that might be?
It looks to be somewhere around $5,000 or $6,000.
So she would cash her checks, and she would keep the money in First National Bank manila envelopes.
In the 30s, at the beginning of 33, there was such a bad economic depression. The banks began to run out of money, and people would literally run to them and line up around them to try to get their deposits out before the banks ran out of money. People of the Depression, which Catherine was, it was not at all unusual for them to bury money, tape it to the back of drawers. My goodness, my grandfather, my father, they hid gold in pipes, they buried it in the ground. And my grandfather was a prison warden, for goodness sake.
Any idea where she might have kept it?
Well, whenever I'd take her grocery shopping, she would usually go into her bedroom and get money out from under the dresser.
Her dresser. So, how does a little old lady like that stuff cash way under there?
It's actually kind of funny. She would use a yardstick.
Smith almost dropped the phone. He'd been wondering all along why there's a yardstick on the bed.
This is actually very helpful. Thank you.
Knowing that she kept money under the dresser, we had to go back and examine, and we found out that it was gone.
So why look in the purse? You've got $5,000 in cash, so you don't need to look in the purse. You need to run before somebody finds you.
Meanwhile, Kenda hopes that recanvassing the neighborhood can turn up new leads.
Do you remember any suspicious activity over at Catherine's house? People going in and out?
Myself and my partner were assisting Smith in this investigation, trying to locate witnesses.
No, I was out of the house most of the day. My wife wasn't home either.
Okay. What about unfamiliar faces in the neighborhood? Anything like that?
I haven't seen anybody like that. But there is somebody that I've been a little worried about.
And who's that?
His name's Daryl. A number of people in the neighborhood have had their houses broken into recently, and I think he's the one doing it.
They identified this individual as a white male in his 40s, and what they really were concerned about is that he supposedly always carries a handgun.
He definitely gives me the creeps.
And do you know where Daryl lives?
Yeah, he's just down the street, at the Blue House.
Thank you for your help.
Well, let's go see Daryl and see what value he may have in this case.
Can I help you?
What they find when they get there is some highly intoxicated individuals partying early and midday.
Shut up back there!
We're looking for Daryl.
Daryl! There's some people here in suits! They want to talk to you! Stay right there, Ma! I'll be right with you.
Morning, gentlemen. What can I do for you?
It's not a crime to be drunk at 11 o'clock in the morning. Could he be drinking that early because he's in celebration of $5,000 coming into his possession? Is he a potential killer?
Daryl, we need you to tell us where you were yesterday afternoon.
Yes, sir. I was here most of the day.
Doing what?
You know, Throwing a couple back with my mom and pop.
How nice. Family that drinks together stays together, I suppose.
We're here all day?
Nah, went down to the dog track around 3 or so. It's usually what I do.
The dog track in Colorado Springs was a greyhound dog racing track with limited stakes gambling. It no longer exists, but at the time in 1979, it was extremely popular.
Did you go there with anybody?
No, I was there by myself. What are you asking me all these questions for?
Daryl, we need to know where you were when your neighbor, Catherine Simpson, was killed.
That old lady? No, I ain't have nothing to do with that.
Is there anyone that can verify you with the dog park?
You know, I think I have a betting slip around here somewhere. Let me check. I'll be right back. Stay there. Talking somewhere. There it is. Here.
They show a timestamp for the day of the murder where he's gambling from 3 p.m. in the afternoon until they close at 9 o'clock that night.
Happy?
Thank you, Daryl. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Hey, Mom!
So Daryl is interesting, pathetic, a drunk, and maybe a burglar, but he's not a killer. He has no opportunity to commit this crime.
With leads disappearing before his eyes, Smith joins the canvas in hopes of drumming up a new one.
Excuse me.
Is this about Catherine?
Yes. Were you friendly with her?
Oh, yeah. She was such a sweet old lady. I can't believe someone would do something like that to her.
Did you see her yesterday?
Yeah, in the morning.
She says she saw her wearing curlers in her hair and working in her garden in the front yard, as is her custom in the morning. And then she goes to the backyard in the afternoon.
Was she talking to anybody suspicious? Someone in the yard, maybe?
No, not that I saw.
What about in general? Any of these neighbors have any issues with Catherine?
No, I can't imagine that anyone would have a problem with her. But I do remember she complained about a neighbor of hers.
She did explain that Catherine complained to her numerous times, but the people who were living next to her were very weird.
Weird?
Especially the son. She had a bad feeling about the son.
Do you know the name?
I don't remember the parents' names, but the son was James DeCoin.
This is the very same fellow that Smith had this awkward feeling about. The guy sitting on the porch drinking beer next door, James DeCoin.
Did she say anything else about him?
Not that I remember.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Ma'am.
Now we're getting information that Detective Smith's feelings probably were justified. Something doesn't add up with this individual. It's time to go back and talk to him.
Can I help you?
Detective Smith, CSPD?
Yeah?
Is James DeCoin here?
No. I'm Colin, his brother. This is my wife, Lydia.
Hi.
Do you know where your brother is?
No, we've been trying to figure that out ourselves.
Colin says, we came over to clean the house before my parents returned from their vacation, but we find that it was already clean when we arrived. James is gone, and all of his stuff is gone.
Any idea where he may have gone?
No, I mean, he didn't leave a note or anything, and couldn't have went far. He's broke.
Colin says he doesn't have a car, he doesn't have any money to call a cab, he doesn't have anything.
Why are you looking for him anyway? Is this about the old lady next door?
Lydia pipes up and says that she had read about this homicide in the paper, and she started getting a bad feeling and was concerned that he may be involved.
Why do you say that?
Well, he's had some issues with the law before. In fact, he just got out of jail in Pueblo not too long ago.
For what?
Sexual assault.
Every alarm that Smith has in his head is going off about James DeCoin. How did he get gone? He didn't have any money. He's been in jail for sexual assault. Mr. DeCoin is not just a person of interest now, he's a suspect.
Last name is DeCoin, D-U-C-O-I-N.
Following up with Pueblo PD as to James's original charges, we find out that he was released about 10 days ago. He was supposed to contact his probation officer in 5 days.
If he checks in with that probation officer, I'm gonna need you guys to hold him, okay? Okay, thanks a lot, John.
Special delivery. I just barely beat the garbage truck.
Bring it to the conference room.
At this point, the case is starting to focus more on James. We knew that he just cleaned up the house, so one possible area where we might find some evidence is in the trash.
Okay, done.
You can find out a lot of stuff from garbage.
Gross.
Criminals aren't very bright. They tend to throw things away that might incriminate them or demonstrate their involvement in a crime.
What do you got there? It's an envelope. It looks like it's been burnt.
What kind of envelope?
The kind you get money from a bank in.
Another one right here.
Well, my. Now, what are you doing with those, Jimmy? So he sat down and reasoned that if he has no car, how does he leave the property? He calls a cab because now he has money. So we go to the cab companies in town.
I'm not seeing anything in that area on the 29th.
What about the 30th?
Okay, here we go. I'm seeing a pickup on East Monument around 8:45 a.m.
They find out that they did pick up an individual at the residence where James was living and took him over to the area of Garden of the Gods.
That's got to be him. What's the exact address where he was dropped off?
I'm actually not seeing one. It looks like he was just dropped off at the intersection of Garden of the Gods Road and Nevada Avenue.
He could have been going anywhere.
The frustrating part of that is that was mostly small retail shops, so it's like, okay, needle in a haystack here.
Yeah, we could get a canvas started in the area.
It's going to take some time, but I suppose we might as well. Thank you for your help.
Sure thing.
While Kenda and other investigators scour Garden of the Gods for a witness, Detective Smith locates another potentially helpful source.
Lucy, thank you for agreeing to see me today.
No problem.
While we're doing the cab thing, Smith is trying to locate any known associates. When people run, they contact people they know. So Smith finds his ex-wife.
After we got divorced, I basically cut off all contact.
Why was that?
He couldn't control his drinking. I put up with it for a while, but then he started getting pretty violent.
She said, at one point he held me at knife point for 2 hours. Said he was going to cut my throat. Oh, that's nice. You know, anything else?
It wasn't just the violence. He was also into some pretty weird stuff, sexually.
What do you mean?
So at this point, the story takes a really creepy and interesting twist. She said he had taken her to one of the few hotels at that time that showed pornographic movies. And he tied her to the bed for 2 hours while he attempted to masturbate with essentially no success.
So when that would happen, would he become violent?
No, he would just get really frustrated.
So how does all that fit together with our crime scene? Well, we have a woman forcibly disrobed and no evidence of sexual assault. The obvious conclusion is Mr. DuCoin is not capable of sexual assault. Even though he may have the desire, he doesn't have the ability.
Did you go to that motel a lot?
No, he wanted to go more often, but it just weirded me out.
Do you remember the name of that motel?
Yeah, it's the Pink Panther over on Nevada Avenue by Garden of the Gods.
Well, isn't that interesting? The day after the murder, he's dropped within a block of the Pink Panther motel by a cab driver.
Lucy, I want to thank you for your time. You've been a great help to us.
Of course.
I'll see myself out.
So Smith immediately gets in his car and heads for the Pink Panther, see if they have a record of James DuCoin getting a room.
DuCoin?
D-U-C-O-I-N?
Nothing with the name DuCoin, but to be honest, I doubt he would have checked in under his real name. Most guys don't.
What about a face? You recognize him?
Oh, yeah, sure. I remember this guy. He was here a couple of nights this week.
James had stayed there the 30th and the 31st. That had been the day after the murder and the subsequent day after that.
How'd he pay for his room?
Cash.
Did you happen to notice if he had a fair amount of cash on him?
Oh, yeah, he had to have. I saw one of them call girls going in and out of his room a couple of times, and they ain't cheap.
For a man who is broke, where did he get this money? We're thinking he got it from the little old lady that he murdered.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
No problem.
While the circumstances point to James Ducoin murdering Catherine Simpson, Smith would feel much more comfortable if he had some hard evidence to back it up.
Hey, Lou.
What's going on, Kenda?
Got some news back from the lab. They examined those burned envelopes. Guess where they came from? First National Bank. The same bank that Catherine Simpson cashed her checks at.
Well, I'll be damned. Let's go to the judge to get an arrest warrant.
So now there's no doubt in our minds that James Ducoin is our killer. Now it's a matter of running him to ground. We're going to find him and arrest him for first-degree murder.
But investigators quickly learn that might be easier said than done.
In the course of hunting him down, we find a sister in California who says that she got a phone call from James Ducoin from a payphone in Florida. What does that mean to us? Mr. Ducoin has crossed a state line.
But sadly, investigators fail to find James Ducoin, and the case goes cold.
There are some cases that are so disgusting and so abhorrent and so violent that they don't ever go away. They just don't. And Catherine Simpson is one of those cases. It just bothered me to no end. Where are you? So 12 years on from this event, I am now a supervisor in homicide.
It's Kenda.
The phone rings in my office, and it's the FBI.
Ducoin. Yeah, of course I remember that one. You're kidding. No, I'll send someone down right away. Thank you.
They have found James Ducoin in New Orleans, Louisiana. Finally, the long arm of the law has reached out and tapped James Ducoin on the shoulder. You are responsible for murdering a little old lady. You thought we forgot, but we don't forget, and we don't forgive.
Afternoon, Lieutenant. You wanted to see me?
Hey, Steve. You heard about the arrest of that cold case suspect down in New Orleans?
Absolutely.
Detective Smith had retired from the police department at that point, so there's no way he could get involved in it. Detective Wood was in homicide at the time, and Wood had an excellent talent for interrogation.
All right. Go get yourself up to speed on the case file. Your flight leaves first thing tomorrow morning.
Yes, sir.
So Wood goes to New Orleans, meets up with an FBI agent. They go to the field office where Ducoin is being held.
So you've already spoken with Ducoin?
Briefly, right after we arrested him.
And how did that come about exactly?
Truthfully, he just kind of fell in our lap. We surveilled him and arrested him without issue.
When the FBI found him, they did so because Mr. Ducoin had applied for an identification in the state of Louisiana. And for some reason, he used his real name, and it popped up in the FBI database.
I don't know nothing about that.
She completely denies any knowledge of the investigation, but Detective Wood continues to work and talk to him.
How did you get into her house?
I told you, man. I have no idea what you're talking about.
James. Can I call you James? Why did you have to stab a little old lady with scissors? Do you think she deserved that?
I ain't a violent person, man. I didn't do that.
Well, maybe you're not now, but you were then, James. It's got to be eating you up inside. Why don't you just let it out?
All right. The hell with it.
Wood gets to him. It takes him a while, but he gets to him.
You got a cigarette? I remember I was outside having a drink. I saw the old broad putting around in her garden.
And he thinks, a little old lady like that probably has money squirreled away in her house. James DuCoin doesn't have 10 cents.
Later that day, I saw that her back door was open. I saw that as my opportunity.
Show me where the money.
Please don't.
And where's the money?
Please don't. I got some in here. Please don't hurt me. Oh.
He says she doesn't resist him. She takes him into the bedroom.
You got your own little bank here.
He says that when he's down working on these envelopes, Catherine Simpson suddenly starts screaming for help in a really loud voice. It startles him.
I tried to quiet her down, but I couldn't. I panicked. And I stabbed her.
Okay, James. I appreciate your honesty, but I don't feel like you're telling the whole story there.
Well, that's all that I remember.
If you look at his story, it's full of holes. It doesn't fit the evidence at the scene.
When investigators found Catherine's body, her skirt was hiked up and her underwear were on the floor. Did you try to sexually assault Catherine?
No. No way.
James, that doesn't sound all that believable to me.
Well, I don't care what you think. That's what happened, all right?
He confesses to this crime. Is he willing to tell Wood everything? No. Criminals are very odd in that regard. They will find certain things that they won't admit to, certain things they don't want you to know, certain things that embarrasses them.
Where did you go after you killed her?
Back to my parents. Took a bath, fell asleep, woke up to all the sirens.
Do you remember talking to a Detective Smith?
I do.
He says Smith freaked him out.
I burned all the envelopes, cleaned the place up, then I left.
So he left that house the next day and stayed at the Pink Panther for 2 nights. He bought a $70 bus ticket in Colorado Springs, and then he went to Florida and stayed there for years.
I eventually made my way to New Orleans under a fake name.
So what made you apply for a license under your real name?
I was just tired, you know.
He said he stayed away from people, and he got very lonely, and he was distressed at having to lie about who he was.
I couldn't take it anymore.
There are some people, they won't admit it to you, but they want to be punished. They know what they did was a horrible thing, and their guilt eats away at them an inch at a time.
Although DuCoin's confession leaves much to be desired, he is formally charged with first-degree murder.
James DuCoin pled guilty to first-degree.
The desert has a way of swallowing sound, swallowing memory, swallowing truth. In Nevada, the land stretches so far and so flat that even a scream seems to vanish before it reaches the next patch of sagebrush. And on a windless night in the late summer of 1998, something did vanish. A truth so strange, so brittle, that the community would spend years pretending it wasn't haunting them. It began with headlights cutting through dust on an old service road, the kind no tourist ever finds and no local ever uses unless they're lost, drunk, or running from something. A truck bounced along the ruts, slowed, and then stopped altogether. Minutes later, the driver was on the radio, with a voice trembling enough that dispatch thought it was interference. All he said was, "There's someone out here. She's not moving." By the time deputies arrived, the desert temperature had dropped fast, the way it does when the heat finally snaps and leaves the night sharp as broken glass. She was lying half on her side, half on her back, a young woman coated in dust so fine it looked like powder from a shattered ceramic mask. Her clothes were torn. Her breathing was shallow. Her pulse thready. No ID. No wallet. No bag. No indication of who she was or how she had ended up on a forgotten road in the middle of a basin that stretched for miles in every direction. Someone whispered, "Did she fall out of a car?" Another said, "No one walks this far out?" Someone else murmured, "Look at her expression." Because even unconscious, her face carried a tension that didn't match the stillness of her body, a kind of frozen dread, a kind of final knowing. The paramedics lifted her into the ambulance, and the dust she'd been lying on blew back into place as if the desert wanted to reclaim her before anyone else could. She died before sunrise, somewhere between the service road and the hospital, somewhere in the dark corridor of a moving vehicle that smelled like antiseptic and engine oil. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She didn't give them anything. Not a name, not a clue, not a direction to point the investigation. She simply slipped away. The county coroner recorded her as Jane Doe, number 982147, age estimate, early 20s. Physical condition, healthy prior to the assault. Cause of death, blunt force trauma combined with shock. Manner of death, homicide. Evidence, minimal. And with that, a case that should have sparked answers instead, collapsed inward like a burned-out star. Detectives combed the scene. They found tire marks, but no pattern. Footprints, but no gait. A scatter of objects, a hairbrush, a cheap silver bracelet, a torn movie ticket, but none matched her fingerprints or DNA. It looked staged. It felt staged. As if someone had arranged a display, an artificial chaos, like a criminal reenacting a scene they didn't actually understand. The desert wind wiped away half the evidence by the end of the second day. By the end of the first week, most of what remained felt accidental. A strand of blonde hair that didn't match the victim. A scrap of blue fabric too clean, too sterile, like something snipped from new clothing rather than torn in a struggle. A set of cigarette butts scattered near the fence line, all from the same brand, all smoked down to the filter, all too neatly positioned to be real. Detectives picked them up begrudgingly, knowing staged evidence when they saw it. Someone wanted the investigation to move in a particular direction. Someone wanted them to chase ghosts. But the worst part wasn't the lack of evidence. It was the lack of identity. No missing persons report matched her description. No distraught families called in. Her fingerprints weren't in any database, and her dental records didn't match any open file in the region. She was a stranger dropped into their world without a single trace of who she'd been. The sheriff held a press conference, flashing her reconstructed photo. News anchors repeated the headline, "Unknown woman found dead outside Sagebrush Hollow," as if trying to make the story stick. But after a few days, the story drifted off the front page. Other tragedies took its place, and she remained a ghost. Inside the sheriff's office, the case file thickened with interviews, theories, and sketches. Truckers reported seeing a woman hitchhiking on Route 50, though none could agree on her clothing or the time. A rancher swore he'd heard shouting days before the body was found, but his wife claimed he'd been drinking that night. A drifter insisted he saw two men dragging something heavy near the highway, but when pressed, he changed the story twice and eventually admitted he might have dreamed it. Every thread frayed, every lead dissolved. Pressure mounted. Detectives worked nights, slept in their offices, stared at evidence boards covered in red string and frustration. They mapped every highway, every truck route, every bus ticket sold in the 2 weeks prior to her death. They established time windows, then broke them apart when inconsistencies surfaced. They questioned motel clerks, gas station attendants, restaurant servers. No one remembered her, or if they did, they remembered her differently. Dark hair, light hair, tall, short, wearing jeans, wearing a dress. The town's collective memory melted under scrutiny, leaving detectives with nothing but a circle of possibilities widening into hopelessness. By early fall, the case slowed to a crawl. The desert grew colder, the nights lengthened, the news cycle moved on, and the woman with no name faded quietly into the cold case archives. But inside the evidence box, sealed in a paper envelope, was something no one had touched since the autopsy. The scrapings from beneath her fingernails. Tissue, dirt, blood. Mostly hers, but maybe not entirely. In 1998, DNA testing was limited, slow, and expensive. The sample was too degraded, too mixed, too small. So the evidence officer labeled it, logged it, and slid it into storage. A forgotten relic from a forgotten tragedy. For 21 years, the box sat untouched. Then, in 2019, a routine audit forced technicians to reopen archived cases. They pulled out dusty containers, scanned barcodes, logged missing items, and tossed what was legally allowed to be destroyed. One technician, a new hire with a habit of double-checking everything, picked up the box labeled Doe, Sagebrush Hollow. She hesitated. Something about the handwriting on the labels looked rushed. Something about the case summary felt incomplete. She opened the box, spread the contents on the table, and paused when she reached the envelope containing the nail scrapings. It felt heavier than expected. Not much, just enough to be interesting. She sent the sample for analysis, not because she expected a miracle, but because technology had evolved far beyond what 1998 could have imagined. Genealogical tracing, high-sensitivity amplification, lineage reconstruction, new tools for old ghosts. Days passed. Nothing came back. Weeks passed. Still nothing. Then, one morning, the lab called the sheriff's office directly. The technician listened, nodded slowly, then sat down without speaking. What they'd found wasn't a match. It wasn't even close to a match. Instead, it was a partial DNA profile from an unknown male. A profile that didn't exist in any criminal database, didn't correspond to any registered offender, didn't link to any missing person. But genealogically, through distant branches and buried connections, it traced to a single family living 3 states away. A family with deep roots, clean records, respectable jobs. A family with no known ties to Nevada. A family with one member who vanished in the early 2000s without a forwarding address, without a trail, without explanation. The discovery hit the department like a shockwave. Detectives who'd left the case behind suddenly sat up straighter. Retired officers were called in. Files were reopened, photos re-examined, statements reinterpreted. The name of the missing family member surfaced again and again, like a forgotten refrain rising to the top of a song. He was a drifter, a loner, a man who worked odd jobs and moved constantly, a man who used aliases, cashed checks under different names, and left behind almost nothing except a fading trail of receipts and half-remembered encounters. But the most unsettling detail wasn't his disappearance, it was his timeline. He couldn't be placed anywhere near Nevada in 1990, not through records, not through witness accounts, not through employment logs. And yet his DNA, his unmistakable genetic fingerprint, was lodged beneath the fingernails of a murdered woman found in the desert that same year. The twist wasn't just shocking. It was impossible, and it was only the beginning. The name the detectives uncovered was like a draft of cold air running through a locked room. Unexpected, unwelcome, and impossible to ignore. They didn't say it aloud at first. They wrote it on a whiteboard, circled it once, then circled it again, as if expecting the ink to protest. A man who vanished long after the Jane Doe died. A man who, by every documented measure, had nothing to do with Nevada in 1998. Yet there he was, a genetic trace lodged beneath the victim's fingernails, whispering a truth no one knew how to process. The lab assured them it wasn't contamination, not old, not new, not mishandled. The DNA fragment was preserved in a way that made contamination nearly impossible. This was contact, physical, violent, direct, a message written in skin and blood. Investigators started pulling everything they could on the missing man, every job record, every address, every phone bill, every witness who might have spoken to him. His life was a trail of temporary rooms and cash payments, construction sites, road crews, seasonal work. People remembered him, but vaguely, like a stranger whose face you see on a bus and forget as soon as the doors open. Quiet, they said. Polite. Kept to himself. Didn't drink much. Didn't talk much. Didn't cause trouble. Every answer was the same flavor, an outline of a man without edges. The timeline slipped through their fingers like dust. In 1998, when the woman died, he was supposedly 3 states away, working at a small lumber yard. No pay stubs, no time cards, just a manager who thought he remembered him, though the dates blurred when pressure tightened. A co-worker insisted he'd seen him at a diner that same week, but couldn't remember if it was before or after the 4th of July, and the investigator's greatest enemy wasn't deceit, it was time. 2 decades make memories buckle, distort, shift into shapes that fit whatever narrative people have quietly built for themselves. The detectives moved to the man's last known address, a trailer park scraped by desert wind. His unit was long abandoned, but neighbors recalled a man who didn't stay long. One woman remembered hearing someone pacing at night. Another claimed she heard raised voices through the thin trailer walls, though she couldn't tell if it was a phone call or the man arguing with himself. Someone else said he owned a duffel bag he kept locked with 2 padlocks, carried it everywhere, never let it out of his sight. When asked what was inside, the neighbor shrugged. Tools, maybe, or something else. The detectives requested access to the trailer's old rental file. Inside the dusty folder were mundane details: the security deposit, the move-in date, the notice of vacancy. But tucked behind the paperwork was a slip of paper no one understood. A utility bill with the wrong name. A signature that didn't match. A forwarding address crossed out with thick black ink. The handwriting was shaky, almost frantic. Something about it felt off, like a message that someone tried to erase but couldn't bring themselves to destroy. One investigator stared at it long enough to feel uneasy. It wasn't the ink. It was the pressure points, indentations from handwriting that didn't belong to the visible text, as if someone had written a different message atop the paper before tearing it off. They sent the indentation sheet for analysis. It would take weeks. Meanwhile, the team dove deeper into genealogy. The DNA profile linked the missing man distantly to several branches of an extended family. Cousins, second cousins, people scattered across the region. Detectives conducted interviews delicately, trying not to reignite decades-old wounds. The family described the missing man as gentle. Strange, maybe. Private, definitely. But never violent, never aggressive, never capable of harming a woman. They described him as someone who drifted not because he wanted to disappear, but because he never quite belonged anywhere. Yet there was one detail everyone shared. At some point in his early 20s, right around the time of the Jane Doe's death, something changed. His letters home grew shorter. His voice, when he called, sounded distant. He became erratic, restless, as if something was following him, as if he was running from a shadow only he could see. One relative remembered him saying, "I made a mistake out there." Another recalled a vague comment about The desert. That seemed out of place, given he'd supposedly never traveled through Nevada. Someone else said he once mentioned a woman, though he didn't name her, didn't explain her, didn't describe a relationship. Just a single sentence dropped in passing, like a loose thread. She didn't deserve what happened. When detectives asked what he meant, the cousin could only shake her head. I figured he was talking about someone from work. Or maybe a car accident, I didn't know. The investigators returned to the Sagebrush Hollow evidence, studying photos with fresh eyes. The scrap of fabric, the hair strand, the cigarette butts, the scattered objects. All of it too neat, too curated, too theatrical. A display arranged by someone who wanted to mimic chaos without understanding how chaos actually looks. Someone trying to cover their tracks, but making the crime scene feel like a stage instead of a real place. And if the missing man was involved, the staging didn't match his personality. He wasn't theatrical. He wasn't deceptive. He wasn't meticulous. Nothing in his history suggested he knew how to manipulate a crime scene. That contradiction gnawed at the investigative team like an itch they couldn't scratch. The coroner's report from 1998 revealed something overlooked. The victim had defensive wounds, but only on one arm. A strange asymmetry, as if she'd fought someone off with one hand while the other was immobilized. The angle of impact on her ribs suggested she'd been struck by someone taller, but not necessarily stronger. The pattern of bruising indicated someone who didn't know how to fight. Chaotic blows, inconsistent strength, no clear technique. A struggle born of panic, not control. The coroner also noted something odd about the residue found on her skin, a combination of soil and industrial dust, the kind found near construction sites, quarries, or lumber mills. Somewhere the missing man might have worked, yet the scrape marks on her back didn't match any surface near the lumberyard he supposedly worked at. They matched something else, something rough and uneven, found in the desert, but also in certain types of transport crates, something used for hauling equipment across state lines, something temporary, mobile. Investigators expanded the search to companies that had operated in Nevada in 1998. They found a transport company with loose hiring policies and even looser record-keeping. The missing man's name didn't appear in their files, but one of his known aliases did. A supervisor vaguely remembered him, said he left without warning, said he kept mostly to himself, said he once asked to switch routes because he didn't want to go back there again. When the supervisor asked back where, the man only shook his head and walked away. Detectives pressed him for details, but memory failed, blurred by 21 years and hundreds of workers passing through. Still, it was enough to draw a line on the map, an approximate route the missing man might have traveled in 1998, a route that passed within miles of Sagebrush Hollow. The case files thickened again. Photos covered walls. Maps sprouted red markers. The story was shifting, forming new edges, revealing hidden shapes. But the question that clung to every detail was the same. If the missing man was involved, why did his DNA show up nowhere else at the scene? Why wasn't it on her clothes, her hair, the ground, the cigarette butts, the staged objects? Why only beneath her fingernails? And why only in a small, partial amount, as if she had grabbed him once? Just once, before something prevented her from fighting back. The indentation analysis finally returned from the lab. The paper the man had signed years ago revealed faint traces of an earlier message written above it. The lab technician enhanced the impressions, building the ghost of the words stroke by stroke. It wasn't a note. It wasn't a name. It wasn't a confession. It was an address. A single address scribbled hastily, violently, almost desperate. An address in Nevada. An address barely 10 miles from where the Jane Doe was found. Detectives drove there immediately. The property was abandoned. Dust thick on the windows, doors warped, a rusted sign hanging loose on a nail. Inside, the floor creaked under their weight. The rooms were bare, except for a single item left in the corner of what might have been a bedroom. A metal lockbox, dented, battered, covered in grime. The detectives pried it open. Inside were belongings, papers, receipts, small personal items, and a photo so faded its faces were hard to make out. But in the center of the blurred image was the missing man. On his left, a woman. The same height, same build, same hair tone. The features matched the reconstruction of the Jane Doe almost perfectly. A cold rush filled the room. The detectives stared at the photograph, unable to speak, unable to process how the missing man posed beside the dead woman he supposedly never met. And then someone noticed something else. The date on the back of the photograph. 1 year after the Jane Doe was murdered. 1 year after she was supposedly dead. 1 year after her body was found in the desert. The impossibility didn't just deepen. It broke open entirely. The photograph sat on the table like a living contradiction, a quiet defiance against every documented fact. Investigators gathered around it, leaning in as if proximity could rewrite reality. The woman standing next to the missing man had the same bone structure, the same faint cleft in the chin, the same slope of the shoulders as the Jane Doe buried in the Nevada desert. Her smile was soft, almost shy, as though caught off guard. The missing man's expression was different, guarded, watchful, as if he knew the camera was a doorway someone might someday walk back through. And on the back of the photo, written in handwriting they verified as his, was a date that refused to make sense. 1999, 1 year after the death of a woman who should not have existed beyond 1998. For a long moment, no one touched the photo. It felt radioactive. It felt like the room was holding its breath. The investigators exchanged glances, each waiting for someone else to speak first. The silence stretched thin. Finally, one detective whispered, "This isn't possible." Another replied, "Maybe the reconstruction is wrong." But even as he said it, he didn't believe it. The resemblance was undeniable, so precise it felt deliberate, as if someone had tried to recreate the Jane Doe, as if the missing man had found a version of her still alive, another her, or the same her, or something that didn't fit into any category they had words for. They looked deeper inside the metal box found at the abandoned property. Beneath the photo were small objects rattled by time, a motel key tagged with a room number from a defunct roadside inn, a pocket knife engraved with initials no one recognized, a folded bus ticket missing its destination stamp, and a torn sheet of notebook paper covered in hurried handwriting. The note wasn't addressed to anyone. The sentences spiraled, written in one breath, frantic and jagged. "She keeps finding me. I don't know how. I don't know why. It's not her. It can't be her. But it is. I saw her again today." The writing trailed off, then resumed lower on the page. "If something happens to me, it wasn't my fault. None of this was my fault." Investigators froze at the phrasing. The man sounded terrified. Of the woman, or of the idea of her, or of something wearing her face. They read the note again, slower this time, tracing each loop and line. The missing man hadn't simply known a woman who resembled the Jane Doe. He believed she was following him, or finding him, or returning to him. The message could have been a delusion, evidence of a deteriorating mind, but the eerie detail was too specific. It's not her. It can't be her. But it is. Detectives considered the possibility that the missing man had suffered a psychotic break, that guilt from a murder could have manifested into hallucinations. But the photo complicated that theory. The woman wasn't imagined. She was real enough to be captured on film, real enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with him. And if she was real, who was she? A twin? A relative? A stranger who looked unsettlingly similar? Or something else entirely? They pulled fingerprints from the box items, but most were smudged or degraded. The motel key yielded nothing. The bus ticket was too worn. The pocket knife handled by too many hands over the years. The photo's glossy surface gave a partial print belonging to the missing man. Expected, but not useful. They needed more. They needed something solid. They needed a fact that didn't rearrange itself every time they looked at it. They returned to the abandoned property, combing through it inch by inch. Dust-coated floors, walls stained by time. No power, no running water. But in the back room, behind a loose panel in the wall, they found another cache. A shoebox sealed with duct tape, edges frayed where someone had peeled it open before resealing it in haste. Inside were unpaid bills, small receipts, scraps of newspaper articles about disappearances, and a single Polaroid. The woman again. Alone this time, sitting on the edge of a motel bed, hands clasped, looking away from the camera. She seemed unaware of being photographed. The lighting was harsh, exposing the sharp angles of her face. But it was unmistakably her, Jane Doe, or the woman who should have been her, or the woman who existed after the body was already in the ground. Investigators enlarged the Polaroid. Her hair length matched the estimated timeline. Her clothing, simple and unremarkable, provided no brand tags or markers visible enough to trace. But behind her, reflected in a warped mirror, was a faint silhouette of a man standing in the doorway. The missing man. Same posture, same angular build. But his face was blurred by poor focus, a smear of motion preserved in cheap film. The detectives studied the reflection for signs of coercion, signs of fear, signs of anything. They found nothing conclusive. The woman didn't look distressed. She looked present, aware, as if she had come to the room willingly. The motel listed on the Polaroid shuttered in 2004. The building still existed, sagging under years of neglect, graffiti covering its windows. Investigators drove out to the site. The door of room 12, where the Polaroid appeared to have been taken, hung loose on a single hinge. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and leftover insulation. Graffiti curved across the walls in layers, a palimpsest of wandering hands. The carpet was ripped, the plumbing gutted, the furniture long gone. But in the corner, beneath a collapsed ceiling tile, they found something. A metal bracelet, thin and delicate, caked with grime. When they wiped it clean, they found a faint engraving on the inside, L.R. The same initials scratched into the pocket knife, the same initials listed on the back of a receipt in the other box. The woman had a name, at least initials of one. Something to anchor her to the world. Something more than Jane Doe. But when they ran the bracelet for prints, they found none. When they cross-referenced the initials with missing persons from the 1990s and early 2000s, nothing matched. When they examined the metal for skin cells or sweat residue, the result was bizarre. The bracelet hadn't been worn recently when it was abandoned, but the wear patterns suggested someone had worn it for years before that, years the Jane Doe never lived. The discoveries kept spiraling. In the motel bathroom, behind the rusted sink, officers found a strip of wallpaper covering a cluster of shallow carvings etched into the drywall. Dozens of lines and dates. Some slanted, some faint. Some marked hard enough to puncture through the material beneath. Most meant nothing. Random dates, maybe. Or maybe they were counting days. But one date froze everyone in the room. July 14th, 1998. The estimated date of the Jane Doe's death. Next to it, etched lightly, almost timidly, were the letters L.R. The detectives felt the desert heat pressing in from outside. Air grew heavy. Silence deepened until breathing sounded intrusive. Slowly the reality settled in. Someone had carved her initials into the wall after she was already dead. or after she should have been dead, or after someone believed she had died. Nothing aligned. Every discovery contradicted the one before it. They reopened interviews with the missing man's relatives. One cousin remembered a story he'd told during a holiday gathering, a moment they'd dismissed as drunken rambling. He said he'd met a woman on the road, a woman who seemed familiar though he'd never seen her before, a woman who asked strange questions about places she shouldn't have known, a woman who, he claimed, showed up where she wasn't supposed to be. At the time, the family assumed he was speaking metaphorically, maybe describing a complicated relationship. But now, with the evidence stacking like mismatched puzzle pieces, the words sounded different, literal, haunting. Another relative recalled a conversation years later, after he'd already disappeared. He had called unexpectedly, whispered that he was trying to fix something, before it repeated. No one understood what he meant. No one asked. He hung up before they could. The relative kept the memory, tucked between more ordinary moments, not realizing its significance until now. Investigators widened the timeline, examining sightings of the missing man across multiple states. They found overlaps between his travels and reports of a woman with similar features to the Jane Doe, brief sightings, dismissed at the time, now resurfacing as potential connections. A diner waitress in Utah who remembered a woman asking for directions before abruptly leaving. A motel clerk in Arizona who recalled a guest who paid cash and left without ever sleeping in the room. A trucker who swore he saw the same woman twice in 2 different cities months apart, wearing the same clothes. Each account felt like a shard of something larger, scattered across years and miles. As they pieced together the chronology, investigators realized a pattern. The woman's appearances always coincided with the missing man's known or suspected locations, always near him, always within reach, as if following, as if searching, as if drawn toward him by some invisible thread. But the most chilling revelation came late one night in the sheriff's office, when an officer compared the Polaroid to the reconstruction photo from 1998. The shape of the woman's face, the angles of her jaw, the faint scar above her eyebrow visible only under enhanced lighting. The same scar present on the Jane Doe during autopsy. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was identical, down to the smallest imperfection, down to the scar she couldn't have had in 2 different lives, down to the detail no reconstruction could have fabricated. The officers stared at the side-by-side images until their vision blurred. Logic buckled. Doubt cracked. The room grew unbearably still. Because the conclusion staring back at them wasn't just impossible, it was terrifying. The woman photographed in 1999 wasn't a look-alike. She was the Jane Doe, alive, a year after they buried her. The revelation spread through the investigation like a shockwave, silent but devastating, shifting the very ground beneath their feet. The Jane Doe they buried in 1998 and the woman photographed in 1999 were the same person. Identical down to scars, bone structure, tiny asymmetries only noticed under magnification. No relative, no twin, no medical anomaly, no rational explanation. The timeline split, warped, then twisted around itself, leaving investigators trapped between what they knew and what they could no longer deny. And yet, denial was easier than the alternative. So they pressed forward, gripping the facts like lifelines, even as those facts rearranged themselves with every new discovery. The sheriff ordered an exhumation. The team arrived at the cemetery before dawn, the horizon barely a pale band against the deep violet of a Nevada morning. Frost clung to the grass. The air smelled metallic, damp with earth and anticipation. They stood in silence as the backhoe dug, each scoop of soil echoing with a weight far heavier than dirt. When the coffin emerged, coated in dust from years of stillness, everyone felt a tightening in their chest. They had buried her believing she was a tragic stranger. Now they were digging her up to ask if she had been someone else entirely. The coroner cut through the coffin seals with steady hands. When the lid opened, a collective shudder passed through the group. The remains were intact, undisturbed, consistent with the 1998 autopsy. Same clothing, same injuries, same cause of death. Same woman. She had not climbed out of the grave. No body had been switched. Nothing supernatural had occurred inside the coffin. But that only intensified the question. If she never left the ground, then who stood beside the missing man in 1999? DNA extracted from the remains confirmed her identity, whatever identity she had. And when the investigators compared her mitochondrial DNA to samples left on the Polaroid and bracelet, the match was absolute. 2 identical genetic signatures separated by a year and an impossible barrier. Death. The coroner swallowed hard, shook his head and muttered, "This isn't right." Scientists deal in certainty. Death certificates do not allow for second opinions. But there she was, dead in one place, alive in another. Identical, undeniable, immutable. The coroner recommended retesting. They did. 3 times. The results did not change. The sheriff ordered a widening of the search around the abandoned property where the lockbox had been found. Teams swept the land in grids, scanning for footprints, fresh disturbances, anything the desert might have preserved. Only one thing surfaced: a strip of cloth half buried under gravel. Its color faded, but still faintly recognizable as the same blue fabric found near the Jane Doe in 1998. The edges were frayed, torn by force, not decay. And embedded in the fibers was a pattern, a smear of biological residue too faint for standard tests. When the lab ran advanced analytics, the result chilled everyone involved. 2 contributors. One belonged to the Jane Doe. The other, faint and partial, matched the missing man. But the material itself was older than both events. Weathering patterns suggested exposure long before 1998. As if the fabric had existed out there before either of them should have crossed paths. As if something was looping, repeating, leaving remnants in places neither had yet arrived. The investigation veered into territory no one wanted to articulate. They focused instead on something they could control, tracking the missing man's path. They built a timeline using scraps, receipts, fuel logs, witness accounts, transient job records. It formed a jagged constellation across the western states, with Nevada always hovering near the outer edge. He had never lived here, but he had passed through twice, maybe 3 times, maybe more. His movements were erratic, inconsistent, as if he were avoiding something only he understood. And everywhere he went, a shadow followed. Sightings of a woman matching the Jane Doe, always silent, always brief, always gone by the time anyone tried to approach. One motel worker in Oregon remembered her distinctly, a quiet woman who paid for a room in cash, then left minutes later. A waitress in Colorado recalled her sitting at a booth, staring out a window as if waiting for someone, her expression strained with anticipation or fear. It was hard to tell. A bus driver in New Mexico insisted he saw her board twice in one night, though the times didn't align and the passenger list had only 1 entry. The sightings spiraled into something more than coincidence, something patterned, something deliberate. The missing man's belongings were catalogued again. In his lockbox, beneath the Polaroids, investigators found something new, a sheet of paper stuck to the underside of the lid. On it was a list of dates, handwritten, some crossed out, some circled. All of them were paired with locations: Nevada, Utah, Arizona, Oregon. The earliest date on the list, July 1998. The day the Jane Doe died. Next to it was a single word: first. No one could explain it. No one wanted to. They followed the next dates on the list. One pointed to an abandoned rest stop in Arizona. They drove there, the desert stretching wide and empty around them. The building was cracked, vandalized, its walls peeling under the weight of years. But inside, carved faintly into the metal of a restroom stall, were initials. L.R., just like the bracelet, just like the knife, just like the carving in the motel bathroom. Below the initials was a sentence scratched in jagged strokes. I'm not supposed to be here. Another date on the list led to a shuttered diner in Utah. On the underside of a table, detectives found the same initials carved into the wood. A third location pointed to a truck stop outside Reno, where the initials were burned into a wooden post, as if seared by a lighter or heated metal. The initials weren't random. They were a trail. A path marked by someone desperate to anchor themselves in reality. A breadcrumb trail leading nowhere but backward, into the shadow of the same impossible truth. Investigators tried to identify the woman the missing man had photographed, hoping she was someone olera, someone real, someone they could interview. But every attempt collapsed. No missing person matched her DNA. No identification records held her prints. No hospital recorded her birth. She existed only in two forms: the body buried in 1998 and the woman appearing sporadically near the missing man in the years after. She was nobody. She was two bodies. She was one impossible self. The detectives returned to the carving in the motel room, the list of dates, the etched initials. They began mapping them alongside the missing man's known movements. Lines crossed, circles aligned, and suddenly the same date appeared on both maps, October 12th, 1999. The date written on the back of the photograph. The date the missing man and the woman were seen together. But something else occurred that day. Something buried in old dispatch logs no one had thought to connect. At 11:42 p.m, a call came into 911 from a payphone off a rural road 20 miles from the motel. The audio recording was degraded, almost unintelligible. But when investigators enhanced it, a voice emerged, shaking, frantic, terrified. A male voice, and behind him, faint, a female voice repeating the same phrase over and over. The recording caught only fragments. I didn't. It's happening again. Static swallowed the rest. The caller hung up. No officers were dispatched. The payphone was dismantled years later. No one traced the call, but the timestamp matched the date on the photograph. They played the recording again. The male voice was compared to the missing man's known audio samples. The match was near certain. And the female voice, though faint, warped, barely audible, matched the vocal characteristics from the Jane Doe's post-mortem imaging. Two voices, one dead, one vanished, together. Investigators drove to the location of the old payphone. The booth was gone, replaced by a barren stretch of gravel and a row of dying shrubs. But the desert has memory of its own. In the dirt, partially buried by wind-carried sand, they found something metallic glinting under the afternoon sun. A small necklace pendant, simple and circular. They lifted it carefully. On the back was the same engraving they had come to dread, L.R., and embedded in the clasp was a fragment of skin tissue, enough for DNA testing. When the results came back, they confirmed what no one wanted to admit. The skin belonged to the Jane Doe, but the sample was dated, chemically, biologically, at least a year newer than her death. The investigators stared at the lab report, caught somewhere between disbelief and a primal unease that felt older than science. Something was looping, something was repeating, something was crossing its own timeline. The missing man was never running from the law. He was running from her, and she was always one step behind. The desert road where the payphone once stood stretched out like a scar across empty land, a place forgotten by most and remembered only by those who needed to leave pieces of themselves behind. Investigators stood in silence, staring at the pendant bagged as evidence, its engraving L.R. glinting faintly through the plastic. The sun was sinking low, painting the basin orange and red, but the air felt colder than it should have. The kind of cold that slips under the skin, the kind that suggests something unseen is watching. They gathered their equipment, but no one spoke during the ride back. Voices felt useless in the wake of something they didn't yet understand. Silence was the only thing that made sense. Back at the sheriff's office, the lab techs ran more tests on the pendant. The skin fragment wasn't just newer, it held chemical markers that suggested the woman had been alive long after 1998. Vitamins absorbed into hair, environmental particles embedded in the pores, details impossible to explain away. And mixed within the biological residue was something else, something faint but unmistakable. The missing man's DNA. Not enough to suggest violence, not enough to suggest she'd fought him while wearing it. The pattern hinted at proximity, close contact, as if he had clasped the necklace onto her himself. Investigators wrestled with the implication. Were they partners? Friends? Strangers bound by something neither could escape? Every answer opened new doors, and every door led somewhere darker. They revisited the lockbox, the Polaroids, the scrawled note. One detective proposed a theory no one wanted to entertain, that the missing man wasn't running from guilt, but from inevitability. That he believed something was hunting him, something wearing the face of a woman already dead. Another detective countered, insisting they were dealing with a case of mistaken identity, a string of coincidences, a man spiraling into hallucination. But even as the words left his mouth, his eyes betrayed doubt. Coincidence couldn't account for identical DNA. Hallucinations couldn't carve initials into walls across multiple states. Delusion couldn't place a living woman into a photograph a year after her death. The sheriff pushed for structure. Facts. Dates. Locations. Something linear amid the unraveling. They analyzed the missing man's list of dates again, this time tracing the movement patterns with timestamps from security footage, witness statements, and store receipts. Slowly, a route emerged, uneven, erratic, but traceable. Each stop along the path aligned with anomalies, sightings of the woman, unexplained disturbances, abandoned items with her initials, phone records with missing call logs. And as they charted it out, a horrifying pattern formed. Every place the missing man traveled, he left within days of the woman's appearance. Sometimes hours, sometimes minutes. As though he sensed her before she arrived. As though he knew she was coming. One detective hypothesized he was stalking her, but the evidence didn't hold. He fled after she showed up. He abandoned jobs, housing, belongings. He vanished mid-shift, mid-rent, mid-paycheck. His disappearances weren't calculated. They were acts of desperation. The kind of desperation that comes only from fear. The experts weighed in. Trauma, paranoia, PTSD. But there was no event in his past to justify such behavior. No record of abuse, no war service, no accidents, no breakdowns. Nothing to anchor his fear except the woman herself. The sheriff ordered a deeper analysis of the Polaroid from 1999. Enhanced imaging revealed something everyone had missed. The shadow of a bruise on the woman's collarbone. A bruise matching the shape of a specific wound the Jane Doe had in 1998. A wound caused during her struggle. A wound that should have healed long before 1999, if she were alive. But bruises don't reappear on dead bodies, and bruises don't reappear on people who shouldn't exist. The investigators studied the photo until their eyes blurred. The bruise was real. The scar above her eye was real. The asymmetry in her left nostril cartilage was real. Details so specific that they could only belong to one person, the Jane Doe. Someone whispered, "She died with that bruise." Someone else replied, "Then how does she have it again?" But no one had an answer. They expanded the search radius around the abandoned property in Nevada, the home tied to the missing man's hidden address. They brought in cadaver dogs, drones, thermal imaging. The desert gave nothing easily, but on the third day, near a cluster of juniper bushes, One dog stiffened and barked. The earth there was soft, disturbed years ago. They dug carefully. What they found wasn't a body, but a journal, wrapped in plastic, preserved surprisingly well. The missing man's handwriting filled the pages, the ink shaking, uneven, frantic. It wasn't a diary. It was a record, a log, a warning. She is the same. I don't know how, but she is the same. I buried her. I saw her. I know what I saw. Then she came back. Not right away. Not at first. But she found me again. She doesn't always look the same. Sometimes she's older, sometimes younger. But it's always her. Always the same eyes. Detectives turned the pages with dread. She doesn't talk. Not at first. She watches. She follows. But then she starts saying things I know I didn't tell her. Things she shouldn't know. She told me what I said the night she died. But she died before I said it. The investigators exchanged glances, fear creeping in through the cracks of professionalism. I tried to leave. Took new names, new jobs, new states. She always finds me. Always one step behind. She's not angry. That's the worst part. She looks at me like she's waiting for me to understand something. I don't want to understand it. Then, near the end of the journal, she was at the motel again. I took the photo because I needed proof. I needed to know I wasn't imagining it. But when I looked at the photo later, she wasn't in the mirror. Only I was. The sentence that followed was scratched so violently the pen tore through the page. Why wasn't she in the mirror? Why wasn't she in the mirror? Why? The last entry chilled the room. If she comes again, I won't run. I'm tired. I need answers. I'll ask her. If something happens to me, tell them I didn't lie. Tell them she was real. Tell them she was alive. The journal ended abruptly. There were no pages about what happened next. No entry explaining where he went. No clue whether he met her again. No hint of what he learned, if he learned anything at all. Detectives closed the journal slowly, as though afraid of waking something hidden between the lines. The sheriff ordered a full forensic analysis of the soil where the journal was found. If he buried the journal, perhaps he buried something else. Someone else. But the ground gave up only the notebook. The team shifted focus to the list of dates again. The final date circled on the page was April 6th, 2001. No location listed, just the date. A dead end, until an analyst cross-referenced regional incidents. On that same day, a ranger reported seeing a man stumbling through a remote stretch of desert 2 hours east. Disoriented, sunburned, clutching a duffel bag. When the ranger approached, the man bolted, leaving the bag behind. Inside the duffel bag were items investigators recognized instantly. Receipts, clothes, a toothbrush, a small pocket Bible. All confirmed to belong to the missing man. But there was one more thing. A photograph. Newer than the others. Undamaged. Crisp. It showed the missing man sitting on the edge of a desert ridge, looking exhausted, staring at the ground. And standing behind him, just slightly out of focus, was the woman again. L.R., her expression unreadable, her eyes fixed directly on the camera. She was closer now, closer than she had ever been in any photo, as if she were stepping into frame, as if she were arriving. And though the photograph had no timestamp printed, the film used was traced to a brand discontinued in early April 2001, meaning the photo could only have been taken within days of the missing man abandoning the duffel bag, meaning she was still with him, meaning she was still alive, meaning the timeline didn't end there. And the investigators realized something with cold clarity. Whatever happened on April 6, 2001 wasn't the end of the missing man's story. It was the beginning of something much worse. The photograph found in the duffel bag became the new center of the investigation, a gravitational point pulling every theory, every fear, every fragment of evidence into its orbit. The missing man sat in the foreground, slumped forward, his hands hanging loosely between his knees. His face looked hollow, drained of something essential, as though the desert had stripped not just his strength, but his sense of self. But it was the presence behind him, the woman, L.R., standing half in shadow, that froze the room when the image was projected onto the wall of the sheriff's office. Her expression was different this time. No longer vacant, no longer distant, no longer caught mid-motion or unaware. She was looking directly into the camera, directly at whoever had taken the photo. And her eyes were filled with something impossible to decipher: anger, sorrow, resignation, or perhaps something deeper, something that didn't belong to any emotion humans have names for. Her posture was unnaturally still, her hands relaxed at her sides. No tension, no fear, no urgency. She looked like someone who had finally reached the place she was meant to be. Investigators enhanced the background, examining the ridge, the rock formation, the line of the horizon. One detective recognized the terrain, an area near the state border, far from any marked trail. They drove there the next morning, arriving just after dawn. The desert stretched silent and pale blue under an enormous sky. They followed natural landmarks marked in the photo, weaving through ridges and gullies until they found the exact spot the missing man had sat. The ground bore signs of disturbance, shallow depressions, scratches on stone, a faint circular mark where the duffel bag must have been placed. But the desert, always hungry and tireless, had started its slow work of erasing the traces. The investigators fanned out, searching for anything overlooked. One of them knelt by a boulder and brushed away sand, revealing a half-burned photograph. Nothing but the corner of an image, the rest charred. The surviving fragment showed the edge of someone's shoulder, a familiar curve, a hint of hair. They collected it with gloves, bagged it, and moved on. A few minutes later, another detective called out. Embedded in a crack between two stones was something metallic. They pried it loose, a small rusted key, the kind used for old lockers or storage units. Attached to it with a brittle rubber loop was a tag. The ink faded but still legible enough to read, Unit 47. There was no indication of which facility the key belonged to, no city, no street, no company name. But investigators cross-referenced every storage facility in the region, expanding the radius mile by mile. Only one location had units numbered that high and had existed during the missing man's timeline, a run-down storage complex on the outskirts of Wells. The facility had changed ownership multiple times. Records were inconsistent. Some files had been lost in a flood, others destroyed due to mold. It was exactly the kind of place where someone trying to stay hidden might stash pieces of a life they didn't want anyone to find. They arrived at the facility under a sky smeared with darkening clouds. The wind had begun to rise, whining through the chain-link fence. The manager, a tired man with nicotine-stained fingers, hesitated when they showed him the key. Unit 47? Haven't opened that one in... Hell, must be 20 years. He muttered. He checked his clipboard, frowned, double-checked. That unit's been marked inactive since 2002. Unpaid, abandoned. Should have been auctioned off, but... He shrugged. Paperwork got lost, I guess. They followed him down a row of rusting doors. Dust swirled around their boots. The manager inserted his master key beside the old lock. It might be jammed, he warned. But when the detective slid the recovered key into the secondary lock, it turned with an unnervingly smooth click, as if it had been waiting for years just to be opened. The door groaned upward. Inside, the air was stale, heavy, tinged with something metallic. A single bulb dangled from the ceiling but flickered uselessly when tested. Flashlights cut through the dark, revealing a cramped space stacked with boxes. Not random debris, organized storage. Every box was labeled with a date, some handwritten, some typed. The earliest date, June 1998. The latest, April 2001. The exact range of the missing man's troubled timeline. They opened the first box. Inside were newspaper clippings, articles about disappearances across multiple states. Handwritten notes in the margins circled dates, underlined names, added question marks beside locations. Nothing connected at first glance. But every circled article shared a common detail. Each victim had been last seen near remote roads or desert regions. The next box held clothing, women's clothing, items that matched the Jane Doe's size, some worn, some torn, some stained with desert dust. One piece in particular, a blue blouse, matched the scrap found in 1998 almost perfectly. Same fabric, same texture, same stitching. Yet this garment looked newer, less frayed, less aged. Another box contained cassette tapes labeled only with dates. They found a player in the corner, its battery corroded. They powered it using a lab adapter and inserted the first tape. Static crackled. Then a voice emerged. The missing man's. "I saw her again," he whispered. His voice trembled. "Not sure how she found me this time. It's like she knows where I'm going before I do." Tape ended abruptly. The next recording began with labored breathing. "She doesn't sleep. I don't think she needs to." A pause. "I tried to talk to her today. She just stared. She looks wrong, like she's wearing her own face, but it doesn't fit anymore." Another cut. The third tape. "I followed her, just for a minute, just to see. She walked into the desert. No flashlight, no hesitation. I don't know how she found her way." A strained sound. "I shouldn't have followed. She turned around. She knew I was there." More tapes followed. The entries grew more fragmented, more frantic. "I found her footprints, but they just ended. She said she remembered dying. She asked me why I left her there. She asked me what I buried, and one that made every investigator freeze. She told me she has been here before, more than once." They listened in silence, a tension thickening around them like the tightening of a vice. The recordings spanned months, then years. Each entry chronicled the missing man's descent, not into madness, but into something far more structured. His fear was consistent, lucid, grounded in detailed observation. He wasn't losing grip on reality. Something in reality was losing grip on him. They opened the final box. Inside were dozens of Polaroids, some damaged by heat, some washed out by sunlight, some burned at the edges. Most showed empty landscapes, highways, motel rooms, gas stations, lonely stretches of desert. But in the background of several, barely visible, was the woman. Sometimes she stood at a distance, sometimes closer, sometimes blurred, as if caught mid-motion, sometimes perfectly clear, but always watching, always present, always too near. One photograph made the room fall silent. It showed the missing man asleep in a chair, slumped forward like a marionette with its strings cut. And behind him, in the doorway, the woman stood again. But this time her head was tilted, and her expression, soft, almost mournful, was unlike anything they had seen before. As if she understood something he didn't, as if she pitied him. The timestamp on that Polaroid matched the date of the man's final journal entry, April 6, 2001. Investigators combed every inch of the unit again. Under a tarp in the corner, they found something heavy, a metal container, sealed with clamps. They hesitated before opening it, every instinct warning of something irreversible, but protocol demanded action. Inside the container was sand, just sand, desert sand, packed tight, spilling over the edges when the lid lifted. They sifted through it, expecting something buried beneath the first layer. Nothing. More sand, until a bone, small, human, then another, and another. But they weren't remains of a complete body. They were fragments, repeated fragments. The same bones, the same structure, the same healed fracture lines, duplicated, over and over, multiple sets, all belonging to the same woman, all belonging to the Jane Doe, all aged differently, as if someone had died multiple times in different years, as if someone had been found over and over, as if someone existed on a loop. The investigators recoiled, dropping the final bone back into the sand. A creeping dread slid into the room, silent and suffocating. Something ancient, something wrong. Someone finally whispered, "This isn't one woman." Another said, "No, it is one woman." And the sheriff, his voice cracking under the weight of the truth forming in front of him, murmured, "It's her. Every time. It's always her." The discovery in the storage unit clung to the investigators long after they left, following them back to the sheriff's office like a shadow that refused to fall behind. Multiple sets of bones, all from the same woman, all aging at different rates, as though time itself had fractured and rearranged her across years. No one dared put their thoughts into words during the drive back. Words would make it real. Words would cement the impossible into something they might have to face directly. Instead, they rode in silence, flashing through miles of open desert that suddenly felt too empty, too wide, too watchful. The sheriff called an emergency meeting. Detectives filed into the small conference room, its buzzing fluorescent lights casting a sterile glow over faces already strained with disbelief. On the center table lay the evidence, the Polaroids, the journal, the tapes, the bones sealed inside clear bags. No one sat. They hovered around the table like witnesses at an autopsy, standing on the edge of a truth no one wanted to dissect. The medical examiner broke the silence first. His voice was low, cautious. The bone samples. Each one belongs to the same individual, the same woman. But the cellular breakdown suggests different times of death. He swallowed, eyes flickering toward the plastic bags. One set looks like it's been exposed to the elements for 20 years, another for 10, another for 3, another only months. Murmurs rippled across the room. One detective stepped forward sharply. "That's not possible." The examiner nodded. "I know, but whatever this is, it doesn't obey the timelines we understand." Another detective leaned in, palms pressed against the table. "So what are we saying? She died once? Twice? Multiple times?" His voice cracked. "What does that even mean?" The sheriff cut through the rising confusion. "We're not here to guess. We work with what we can verify. And what's verified is this: the missing man kept encountering her, across states, across years, and every time she was alive." "But so was she dead," someone whispered. The sheriff didn't respond. Couldn't. They played another cassette tape from the storage unit. The missing man's voice trembled as it filled the room. "She found me again last night. I thought I'd lost her in the canyon, but she was waiting near the truck. Same clothes as before, same bruise on her collarbone. The bruise never heals. It's always there. Like time doesn't move for her the way it does for us." Static hissed. Then the voice returned. "I asked her what she wants. She said she didn't know. She said she's looking for something. Something she keeps losing. Something she has to find before it happens again." A long pause. The man's breathing grew fast, uneven. "She said she remembers more each time." Silence swallowed the end of the recording. The room stiffened. The sheriff took a slow breath. He believed she wasn't a normal person. "He believed she wasn't one person," another detective muttered. The medical examiner stepped closer to the Polaroid from 1999. "Look at her eyes," he said. "They're consistent. Too consistent. Most people age in small ways. A shift in tension around the eyelids, tiny changes in expression patterns. She doesn't. She looks like she's paused mid-moment. Except the bruise moves." A detective countered. "Yes, but the bruise isn't fresh. It's repeated. It's the same mark, exactly the same shape, appearing in multiple photos years apart. It hung in the air like a whispered curse. Repeated injuries, repeated deaths, repeated sightings. Like time wasn't a line for her, but a loop." One detective, newer to the force, less hardened, finally broke. "This isn't real," he said, voice shaking. "This can't be real. Someone's messing with us, staging this, making copies of her, something, anything else." Another detective responded quietly. "Then who took the photo where she isn't in the mirror?" The younger detective fell silent. Logic fractured under the weight of contradictions. Investigators turned to the journal again. A page near the end held a small drawing, a crude sketch of a spiral, marked with arrows pointing inward. Next to it, the missing man had written, "She keeps coming back to the same point. I think she's trapped. I think she's trying to reach the center." They flipped the page. I saw her die once. I know I did. But then I saw her again, before it happened. I don't know which version is real. Maybe none of them. Maybe all of them. Another page. If she finds the center before I do, I think I'll disappear. I think she will, too. A chill ran through the room. "What's the center?" someone whispered. No one answered. A map of the missing man's recorded locations was pinned to a corkboard. Red markers dotted the western states. When one detective stepped back, she frowned. Something about the pattern bothered her. She removed the strings they'd used to link the sightings and replaced them with a new set, ordering them by date, oldest to newest. A shape emerged, a slow curve, then a tightening arc, then a spiral. The same spiral the missing man had drawn in his journal. The center point lay in Nevada, exactly where the Jane Doe was found in 1990. Exactly where she would be found again if the pattern repeated. The room fell still, a heavy, suffocating stillness. The sheriff spoke first. "She keeps returning to the same place," another detective corrected softly. "She keeps returning to the same moment." They mapped the coordinates precisely. The spiral tightened with each sighting. Each encounter drew closer to Sagebrush Hollow. It was as though the missing man had been orbiting the center while she moved inward, step by step, iteration by iteration. One detective suggested they revisit the burial site. Another suggested reviewing autopsy photos again. A third recommended re-examining the fabric scrap found in 1998, its age, its wear patterns. The sheriff agreed. They needed to look at everything from the beginning. Every piece of evidence might hide a clue they missed before. But before they could move, the laboratory door swung open. A forensic analyst stepped in, pale, breathless, holding a printed report. "We ran a deeper analysis on the necklace pendant," she said. "The piece you found near the old payphone." The sheriff motioned for her to continue. "The metal shows signs of thermal stress," she explained. "Repeated thermal stress. Heating and cooling cycles far beyond normal environmental exposure." "How many cycles?" a detective asked. "Hundreds." She paused. "Maybe thousands." "What does that even mean?" another detective demanded. The analyst swallowed. "It means the pendant wasn't lost once. It was lost over and over, left in the desert during different seasons, different years, different conditions, like—" She hesitated. "Like it's existed in the same place across multiple timelines." The room erupted in confusion, objections, disbelief. But the analyst raised her voice above the noise. "And that's not all. The residue pattern on the skin cells embedded in the clasp. It's layered, older cells beneath newer ones. But the sequencing doesn't match any normal biological timeline. It's scrambled, looped, as if the same person's skin regenerated, then degraded, then regenerated again in cycles that don't align with human physiology." Someone whispered, "So she's dying and coming back?" The analyst shook her head. "Not coming back, existing out of order." The sheriff slammed his hand on the table. "Enough! We are losing control of this investigation. We need something grounded, something we can act on." But his voice wavered. He didn't believe his own words. A detective who had been silent until now lifted the last Polaroid, the one from 2001, where the woman stood closer than ever behind the missing man. "There's something else," she said. "Something no one mentioned." She held the photo under the light. "Look at her shadow." They leaned closer. The missing man's shadow stretched long across the desert floor, angled with the sun behind him. But the woman's shadow was pointed the opposite direction, as if the light source didn't apply to her, as if she came from somewhere beyond the frame. The detective lowered the photo slowly. "She's not bound to the world the way we are." Someone whispered the obvious, terrible conclusion. "She's not from here." But another detective, voice trembling, answered, "She is from here. That's the problem. She's from here. Every time." A suffocating silence fell. The sheriff exhaled shakily. "We need to decide our next move." Before anyone could speak, a deputy burst through the door, face drained of color. "You need to turn on the police scanner," he panted. "Now." The sheriff grabbed the radio, flicking through static until a dispatch voice broke through. Caller reports a woman walking along Route 93 near mile marker 214. Description matches. The dispatcher hesitated. Matches the Jane Doe from 1998. Every head snapped upward. The deputy swallowed hard. There's more. The caller said she was walking in the middle of the road. Alone. Dust all over her. Same clothes as the reconstruction photo. The sheriff's hands shook. When was the sighting? The deputy whispered, 3 minutes ago, and the room erupted into motion. The cruisers tore down Route 93 with sirens off, engines roaring through the desert silence like a warning the land itself refused to echo. The road was empty, a thin grey ribbon splitting the vast, burning world into two equal halves. Dust spiraled behind the vehicles in long, ghostly trails. Inside each cruiser, the officers gripped the wheel harder than necessary, knuckles white, breath shallow. No one spoke. Words felt fragile, too fragile for what they were about to face. The dispatcher's last transmission still hung in the air. Woman in the road, matches the Jane Doe, same clothes, dust-covered, moving slowly. The kind of slow that sounded wrong. The kind of slow that sounded deliberate. As the lights of mile marker 214 came into view, the sheriff squinted through the windshield, searching for any figure, any movement, any break in the empty stretch of asphalt ahead. The desert wind picked up, scattering sand in small, restless spirals. For a moment, there was nothing. And then something. A shape, faint at first, a silhouette emerging from the shimmer of heat. The sheriff's foot lifted from the accelerator. The cruiser rolled to a crawl. Through the wavering air, the figure sharpened. A woman. Thin, dust-covered. Her steps small, almost hesitant. Her hair clung to her face. Her clothes, the same torn, faded blouse described in the original report from 1998, hung stiff with grit. For a moment, the sheriff thought she might collapse, but she didn't. She stood there, steady in the road, facing them as if she had known exactly where they would arrive, exactly when they would reach her, exactly how the scene would unfold. One detective whispered, "It's her," and the words seemed to vibrate through the cruiser. The sheriff stepped out slowly, one hand raised, the other hovering near his holster. Not to threaten, but because instinct demanded he brace for something he didn't understand. The gravel crunched under his boots. The woman didn't react, didn't blink, didn't move. She stood like a figure carved from the landscape itself. As he approached, the air around her felt colder, unnaturally so. He paused, breath visible for a split second in the otherwise sweltering desert heat. "Ma'am," he called gently, "we're here to help." The words felt absurdly human, painfully inadequate. Her eyes lifted to him, and in that moment, the sheriff understood why the missing man had run. Her gaze wasn't empty. It wasn't lost. It was old, ancient, like she'd carried something through time no human had ever meant to see. One of the detectives stepped closer. "LR?" he asked softly, the initials sounding fragile in the dry air. Her eyes shifted toward him, slowly, with intention. The detective froze. Something in that look pinned him to the asphalt, as if she could see every version of him, past, present, future, in a single, unbroken stare. Her lips parted. A sound escaped. Not a word. Not at first. More like the echo of something spoken long ago, repeated until meaning eroded away. "Again," she murmured. The sheriff's pulse thundered in his ears. "Again?" he echoed, stepping closer. "What's happening again?" Her head tilted, the gesture slow and unsettling. Another whisper. Again. The wind gusted across the road, carrying dust that swirled around her ankles without touching her shoes, as though it circled her but never dared cling. The detectives exchanged glances, fear sharpening their features, but the sheriff moved forward with trembling resolve. "Ma'am," he said, voice unsteady but strong enough to hold form. "My name is Sheriff Danner. We can help you. Are you hurt? Do you remember your name?" Her pupils dilated. A flicker of something. Recognition? Memory? crossed her face. And then she said something that turned the desert into a vacuum, draining the heat from every living thing. I died. The words were clear, quiet, certain. No one moved. I died, but I'm here. Again. A detective stumbled back. Another cursed under his breath. The sheriff stepped forward instinctively, though every muscle begged him to retreat. Listen to me, he said carefully. We don't know what happened to you. We're trying to understand. But we need you to come with us. We need to make sure you're safe. She blinked, a slow, unnatural blink, like her body was remembering steps in a sequence it hadn't traveled in years. He tried to leave, she said, voice trembling like radio static. But I found him. Who? The sheriff asked. Her eyes drifted across the empty desert, as if searching for a memory that wasn't finished writing itself. And ran. The missing man. The investigators felt a sharp, collective pull in their chests. But he never understood, she whispered. Understood what? The sheriff pressed. She turned her gaze back to him. Her expression cracked, not into fear, not into pain, but into something like grief, worn down to the bone. It wasn't his fault. One detective stepped forward. Then whose fault was it? Her right hand lifted, trembling violently. Not pointing outward, not pointing at them, pointing at herself. The wind died completely. Silence pressed in from every direction. Even the sun felt dimmer. I broke it, she whispered. I broke the moment. Detectives stared at one another. The sheriff forced the words out. What moment? She took a step forward. Her footfall made no sound. Then another step, and another, until she stood only a few feet from the sheriff, her presence wrong in some unspoken way. Too still, too cold, too quiet. Her voice dropped to a fragile breath. The moment I was supposed to die. The static of incomprehension passed through the officers. The sheriff swallowed, his mind clawing for grounding. You mean, in 1998, on the service road? On the A faint nod. But I fought it, she whispered. I fought the moment. Detectives exchanged horrified looks. One whispered, She's talking about time, but no one dared respond. The moment doesn't like being broken. It tries again. And again. And again. The sheriff felt his skin crawl, his pulse pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. Are you saying you're caught in it? Like a loop? A flicker of relief, brief and sorrowful, crossed her face. Loop, yes. Loop. She looked down at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. Sometimes it kills me. Her voice cracked. Sometimes it doesn't. The detective stared, breath frozen, as she continued. Each time I come back, I remember a little more. Each time I break the moment, it punishes the world around me. What does that mean? The sheriff asked, his voice no longer steady. Her gaze lifted, her breathing slowed. The temperature dropped another degree. You found my bones, she whispered. The ones from before. A detective stepped back involuntarily. They're all me, she said. They're all the versions of me that didn't make it out. The sheriff's mouth went dry. But I did, she went on. This time, something about the word this made every officer stiffen. But it won't let me go. Her eyes filled with something like tired resignation. Until I return to the place where it started. The sheriff's breath caught. Sagebrush Hollow. Her expression changed. Confirmation without words. Detectives shifted uneasily. One whispered, She wants to go back. Another whispered, Or she needs to. The sheriff steadied his breath. If you come with us, we can protect you. She stepped back, not in fear, in refusal. You can't protect me, she whispered. You can't protect him. You can't protect anyone. The sheriff's heart hammered. Protect from what? She blinked slowly, as if bracing herself. From the moment catching up? A tremor shook the air. So subtle most of the detectives mistook it for the rumble of a distant truck. But the sheriff felt it deeper, like a vibration under the surface of reality. The woman stiffened, head snapping toward the horizon with unnatural precision. It's close, she breathed. What's close? the sheriff demanded. She looked at him with an expression so full of regret it hollowed the space between them. The next version. The detectives panicked, looking around, scanning the horizon. The sheriff swallowed. There's more than one of you? There's always another one, she said softly. Every time the moment breaks. The wind suddenly shifted, hard, violent. Sand whipped across the road, stinging exposed skin. The woman didn't flinch. Her hair didn't move. Her body stayed perfectly still, as if the storm swirled around her instead of touching her. Detectives shielded their eyes, shouting. The radios crackled with static. The sky dimmed unnaturally, and in the middle of the chaos, she whispered one last sentence, one that would haunt every officer present for the rest of their lives. She's almost here. The sheriff's heart dropped into a void. She, he repeated shakily. Who? The woman blinked once. Slow, final. The version that remembers everything. The wind surged, the desert roared, and behind them, somewhere in the storm of sand, a second silhouette stepped onto the road. The storm of sand churned across the highway with unnatural force, a wall of beige and gold swallowing the horizon until the world felt reduced to a narrow strip of asphalt and a suffocating hiss of wind. The officers shielded their eyes, shouting to one another, but their voices vanished instantly into the roaring veil. Dust scraped against skin, against fabric, against metal patrol cars rattling in the gale. The sheriff braced himself, squinting through the grit to locate the woman. The first version, the one who had spoken of loops and broken moments. She hadn't moved. She remained fixed on the second silhouette emerging from the storm's maw. As the shape solidified, something primal twisted in the sheriff's gut. The wind seemed to bend around the incoming figure, funneling toward her instead of away, as if pulled by forces beyond physics. The outline sharpened slowly. Shoulders, arms, legs, and then the face. The unmistakable face. Identical to the woman already standing before them. Same features, same posture, same impossible familiarity. But the second woman carried something the first did not. Intent. A cold, steady purpose etched into every step. A force of inevitability. The first woman, the dust-covered survivor, whispered just loudly enough for the sheriff to hear despite the howl of the wind. She remembers everything now. The second woman stepped fully into view. The storm parted around her, slicing into two swirling vortices that spun away into the desert. Her clothes were different, cleaner, newer, untouched by the grit that clung to the first version. But the bruises were the same. The scar above her eyebrow was the same. Even the faint line across her lower lip was the same. The sheriff's breath caught. Dear God. Detectives stumbled backward, hands moving to holsters on instinct rather than logic. No one aimed their weapon, not because they weren't terrified, but because every instinct screamed that a gun was as useless against these women as throwing stones at the sun. One detective pointed shakily. Sheriff, is this real? Is this actually happening? The sheriff didn't answer. He couldn't. The first woman spoke without turning around, her voice brittle as cracked ice. Don't touch your guns. It won't matter. The second version finally stopped. She stood about 50 feet away, her eyes locked onto the first. No anger, no fear, no malice, just recognition. The kind of recognition that comes from seeing yourself, even if you shouldn't exist. The sheriff forced himself forward. Both of you, stop where you are. We can help you. Just stay where you... The second version lifted her hand, a small motion, barely anything. But the wind died instantly, dropping the world into an unholy silence. Every officer froze, mid-step, mid-breath, as though a wire had been pulled taut through their nerves. Only the two women moved. The first lifted her chin, defiant, trembling. You came back sooner this time. The second version's voice was steady, almost gentle. Because you broke the moment again. I had to, the first said. I couldn't let it happen. You're only delaying it. You don't know that. I do, the second replied quietly. I've seen what happens every time you try. The ground vibrated. A faint tremor, subtle at first, then stronger, running through the soles of the officers' boots, through the bones of their legs, up into their spines. A low rumble spread across the desert floor. The sheriff steadied himself. "What's happening?" Neither woman looked at him. The second version answered instead. "The moment is collapsing." The first shook her head violently. "No, I can still fix this. I can still—" "You can't." The second's voice cracked, not with emotion, but with exhaustion. "You've tried so many times." The sheriff took a careful step forward. "What moment? What are you talking about?" The second woman finally turned her gaze on him. Her eyes were sharper than the first's, clear, piercing, carrying the weight of years that did not belong on a human face. "The moment that started the loop," she said. "The moment where I died, where I was supposed to die." The sheriff swallowed hard. "On the service road." The second nodded once. "Each version tries to change it, to break it, but the moment always resets." The first clenched her fists. "But it doesn't have to reset, not if I get further than before." The second shook her head. "You didn't get further. You just shifted the collapse." The sheriff's heart pounded. "What collapse?" The first turned toward him suddenly, desperation spilling through her expression. "I tried to warn him. I tried to stop him. I tried to stop myself before the moment caught up." Him, the missing man. The sheriff felt the pieces snapping into place like shattered glass rearranging itself. The second woman stepped closer to the first. The air rippled, distortion radiating outward like heat waves. "He died because of the loop. Every version of him, in every timeline. Because of you. Because you kept trying to fix something that was never supposed to be fixed." The first recoiled. "No, he wasn't supposed to die. That wasn't the moment. That wasn't part of the loop. It became part of it after you changed things." The detectives watched in horrified silence. The sheriff's voice cracked. "You mean, he died in every version of this loop?" The second woman nodded solemnly. "He always dies, unless the moment is allowed to happen as it was meant to." The first woman's voice fell to a whisper. "I couldn't let myself die." The second replied softly. "But you did, every time." The earth beneath them shuddered again. Harder now. Cracks split through the asphalt, small at first, then widening with slow, unnatural deliberation. Patrol cars rattled, their tires shuddering against the breaking ground. The desert beyond the highway rippled like water. The sheriff shouted, "Get back! Everyone back now!" But the officers stood rooted in place, spellbound by the two mirrored figures at the center of the chaos. The second version stepped forward. Her shadow bent unnaturally behind her, stretching in the wrong direction.